Colby, Draper, Jason, Preston, welcome to the show. Welcome to Become Your Own Superhero Live. Jason, Preston, welcome to the show. Welcome to Become Your Own Superhero Live. What is going on with that? All right, can you hear me, gents?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Thank you for coming on today. And thank you for coming on at such short notice on this live broadcast. This is a rare event.
Keep it real.
Taking a leaf out of the American Masculinity podcast book.
Right, he's got the shirt.
Why don't we start off, and either of you two rapscallions can kick off with this. When did it become okay to not show up and be a man of your word?
Probably when the feminist movement took hold. That's probably when when the decline of men started. What would you say, Jason?
Well, I think, honestly, if you want to know my honest answer, I think this all has to do with the fatherlessness issue. I think we have an issue that has gotten progressively worse of boys growing up without a father in the home. I think that's the role of the father, to teach the boys responsibility, teach the boys to honor the word, teach the boys work ethic, teach the boys discipline, teach them, that's a father's role, is to teach those things. And I think as we've seen the collapse of the family and the father disappear off the radar from as far as family goes and raising kids, I think we've seen a lot of these issues progressively get worse in this country and world. So to me, I trace it back to personally.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I don't know is the answer, but I wanted to share something with you both, and Jason and I had an opportunity to talk about this slightly earlier today. There's been a number of instances recently, and this is targeted towards men, right? Nothing to do with the ladies. We love our ladies, love our women, where they've looked me in the eye, they've grabbed my hand, shook my hand, and made a commitment to follow through on something that on both occasions they requested of me and then ghosted me. And I claim ownership and I claim responsibility for that happening, but it still doesn't make it okay. And it's gotten me to the point where I'm losing at times, or at least at the moment, I've felt like I've lost an ability to use my intuition and rely on it, because I'm expecting people to show up in the way that I am, and I'll be the first to put my hand up and say that I've made mistakes in the past. Absolutely I have. But I'm doing a much better job of at least owning up, and if I do make a mistake, getting on the phone, having a conversation, saying, hey, look, this is why it happened, I'm really sorry. I understand if the relationship's severed. Is this just me?
No,
and I don't think it's strictly just a male versus female. I think it also, the female is at the same problem, right? I mean, my wife talks about the same thing. She makes commitments and the women don't follow through. I think it may just be the society that says that's okay, that you don't have to follow through on commitment. I think there's a larger problem than just a male problem. I think it's society in general.
I'm actually going to come in and say this is a male issue. This is a masculine issue. And remember, men and women both have masculine and feminine in them, right? Men are not just all masculine, and women are not all. We have both energies in us, and you need both energies. Men just have more masculine energy, and women have more feminine. So what you have to look at is order. What you're talking about, reliableness, order, following through. Those are masculine traits, are they not? Again, I'm not talking men or women, but again, the masculine is order. That is the very definition of masculine energy, is order. And so this is moving towards completion. It's getting something done. It is seeing the vision through. And whether it's manifesting in women or manifesting in men, this is a masculine trait that we're talking about, that we are seeing a deficiency of. And to me, I look at if as a society, one of the dominant traits of the masculine energy is missing, I would again trace that back to where should that be learned? It's not going to be learned from the feminine, the mothers. That means that's a symptom of the lack of the father in our society, the lack of the dad sitting down with his son and his daughter saying, hey, let's put together a strategy. When you give me your word, that means something. We have politicians that are not good masculine leaders. I mean, from politicians to Hollywood. I mean, most of our leaders are horrible examples of men. I mean, none of them have that kind of integrity that we're talking about. So, yeah, it's lacking in our society, but it is a masculine trait that it's very much missing.
Yeah, I think it's a wonderful point. And gentlemen, maybe for the folks at home that haven't had an opportunity to know you guys prior to this, if you take your individual time, take as long as you need to go through some of your background, maybe if you had both parents growing up into where you are today.
Yeah. I did have both parents, still have both parents alive, thankfully.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Raised 6 kids in the family, so it was chaos all the time. But my dad was always around. He was heavily involved in our lives. Still is. Then I grew up. I got a degree in business, then went on to be a lineman for the power company, and worked there for about 16 years. And jumped over to the stock market, quit my job, jumped to the stock market, and then I met Jason, and his story is awesome. And from there, everything took off, and here we are now. But my life has been, I often think, I don't have that cool story, that background of, I went through these trials, and it was hard, and I came out from it on the other side, which a lot of people do, and they're inspiring to a lot of people. My life was, I hate to say it was easy, but I was blessed, and it was awesome, right? It still is. My life is still great. I still have so much gratitude for everything in my life. So I don't really have that story of, changing direction in my life, but obviously, my big turning point in my life, though, really is in 2017. I went to India. You ever been to India, Ditchburn?
I have, yeah. Yeah, I went for a wedding in 2005, Goa and Mumbai. Yeah, it was awesome.
Oh, man. The weddings there are unbelievable. But
yeah.
I went there, and I see why Bill Gates says you have to go there every year. Bill Gates is a big fan of going back to India every year because there's something there that will change everyone's life, right? I mean, how did you feel about it? Did you feel like it was life-changing, what you saw, what you went through, the culture?
Oh, mate, we're going back in February of 2023 for an event, and I'm very excited to show Anna India. It's just people are amazing, and they don't eat a lot of steak, which is, doesn't align with me, but I won't hold that against them.
Oh, yeah, that cow is sacred, isn't it? Yeah. But it was life-changing. I went there, and, we went with a group, and we did all this meditation, and went and did all these different prayer groups, with different sects there. But I came back with a new appreciation for life and how blessed we are, what we have in America. I woke up like totally a different person from India, being there for 2.5 weeks, to coming back to, just gratitude instead of just being miserable, right? So I had 2 kids with my first wife, got divorced. That was hell. That was pure hell. My divorce was hell. So I say, oh yeah, I didn't go through stuff. Well, divorce was not easy, right? anyone that's gone through divorce knows for years and years that you're just a complete train wreck. Um, I will tell you one thing. Here's the biggest blessing in my life that I can share. Having time to raise my kids now has been priceless. I have two kids that 16 and 18, and they grew up. I still had custody of my kids, but I didn't really get the experience because I was always living in the present moment, right? I was always living in the future. I was always worried about how am I going to get my next dollar? How am I going to, feed my kids? And always worried about something, right? And I never appreciated and loved every second of raising my kids. 7 years later, I meet my wife now, who's amazing. I have 3 kids with her, and being able to raise these 3 kids, that's the true joy. That's the true happiness in life, especially for me. I understand it now because I raised 2 kids before, missed everything, and now I get to enjoy every single second of that. So that's kind of where I am. But Jason, I consider him my brother, and that isn't a compliment, by the way. Really, that's my brother. But he's a stud, and I met him. What was it? 2020, 2019, just before the pandemic, or during the pandemic. He's been an awesome guy. I'll let you tell his story.
Well, one thing I would say, brother, is never diminish whatever experience you had, because what you went through is highly relatable to people that have experienced similar. And it's not relatable to people that have gone through massive trauma. And we need that blend, right? We need that mix. And I would argue that being a lineman for the county is a fascinating career. And I'm sure you've seen plenty of... There was a song that used to be played on New Zealand TV. You might have heard it. I am a lineman for the county, and I drive the main road. Is there anyone famous in America, or is it a New Zealand thing?
No, it's American. It's... I can't think of the guy that sings it, but yeah, it's totally American.
Kenny Rogers? I don't know.
Not Kenny Rogers. That guy's a classic, though. But yeah, I mean, being a lineman's awesome, man. Talk about the ultimate American masculinity is probably being a lineman, honestly.
And we're not talking about the NFL here either, folks.
No, yeah. Not that kind of lineman. Even a lot of people think that. What? You're a lineman? Oh, that's so cool. What team did you play for?
Utah County.
Yeah, he's a county.
That's great, and I know you're a big fan of Jason. I know Jason's a big fan of you as well. Jason, what's your deal, brother? What's your deal?
By the way, how's the volume? Can you hear me all right?
I can. It's better now. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So, yeah, my story is. Really, if we really want to go much further, it's got a lot of adventure and a lot of ups and downs. I will just tell you this.
Jace, just before you start, maybe get the mic a little bit closer to your mouth if you can.
Yeah, let me. Let's do this.
You love birds can share the same one if you need to.
You know what? Throw Colby on full screen, and we're going to switch that around. So there we go. All right, throw that on full screen. There we go.
There we go. That's better.
Okay.
A lot better.
So yeah, my story is I've got a rebel soul. Let's just say that, and I love freedom, and it's given me a very interesting journey in life. But start off my parents. I was just kind of normal troublemaker kid. Always, just growing up, always in trouble. One of the parents, always were in the principal's office with me. But had kind of a dysfunctional family. When I was 12, my parents got divorced, and it was a pretty traumatic divorce. My mom just kind of took up in the middle of the night and just left, and didn't see my dad for a couple of years. So it was, going through that time period of 12 to 14 years old, I didn't really, my dad was not there, period. My mom was constantly moving from one place to the next. Literally every few months we were kind of running and hiding. And I didn't understand at the time what was really going on. Is when you're young and you're going through stuff, you're just surviving. You know what I mean? When you're young and you're going through hard times, you're not in a place where you can kind of say, how do I get through this, or what's really going on outside of in the big picture. You're just surviving. So you're trying to make friends. You're trying to not be a wreck. So so a lot of damage obviously happened. I ended up getting pretty heavy into drugs when I was 15 years old. But we had a pretty rough childhood growing up, and fortunately, when I was about 18 years old, I found mountain biking, and that was able to help me pull myself out of drugs, pull myself out of some of the problems, the problems I'd gotten myself into, the friendships that I'd forged, and mountain biking became my identity. It's really it helped me get rid of all my old things, and I ended up competing at a national level, one of the top 10 in the country, and got aligned, found some spirituality in my life. Ended up, I was already a high school dropout. So after mountain biking, I ended up getting involved in my church, going and doing missionary work, coming back and, going to college. I did really well in college, got married, 2 kids, and all of a sudden it was kind of like living the perfect life. And, it kind of, there was a lot of, let's just say there was a lot of damage that had been done that I didn't know was done. And there was problems I had that I was not aware, because when you kind of feel like the way you see the world is the way everybody sees the world, and so there were certain things that were buried deep within that I didn't realize were causing problems in my life. For example, I didn't, I could leave my wife and my kids for literally weeks at a time and never miss them, and I didn't really understand why that was until later in life, but. There was damage there, and I just kind of plowed through thinking, I've got it all under control. Well, after I've been married, 15 years, on one hand, people looked at me and it seemed like I had it all together. I was successful, had my own business, started a business, sold business, started down the entrepreneur path, living in Florida, kind of having it looked like the American dream. But underneath, there was some real demons that the world couldn't see, and it was kind of like this Jekyll and Hyde. And what most people saw, the religious side, they saw this great spiritual guy, had got it all together, got the perfect family. But what they didn't see was underneath the surface, there was a wrecking ball and a animal that was getting himself out of control. And after being married about, like I say, 15 years, everything kind of came apart. I ended up cheating with my wife. And, again, I could talk a whole story about that. But yeah, I was very involved in the church, very involved. I was a leader in the church at the time in Florida. And when my wife and I divorced, it was, I went and talked to let everyone know my wife left Florida. She came to Utah. My girls, the whole worlds fell apart. And I went dark. I went very dark, and I decided to run. And I just ran from God. I was in Miami, and I ran from God. I ran from myself. I couldn't look myself in the mirror. My business fell apart. I lost everything financially. Everything that I could lose, I lost it. My family, my faith, everything of meaning. And at that same time, I happened to meet my current wife, Alexia. And when I met her, the first night I met her, I was like, holy cow, this girl's the most broken girl I've ever known in my life. I was like, this girl is and I can't tell a lot of her story, but I always tell you this: I don't know anybody who's been through the pain, the abuse, the what she's been through as a child and as a teenager, and all the way up through the time I met her. And so I was like, you know what? I may be a train wreck, but I can take care of this girl. And at the time, I thought it seemed healthy, and obviously that was just an unhealthy thing to do. The broken bird syndrome. But the two of us got together, and she was running from her past, and I was running from my past, and we burned down the city of Miami, and that takes a lot to burn down that city. We got in a lot of trouble, and we got very deep in pretty much every type of problem and darkness you could find. And all this time, my girls had lost complete respect. My girls were 15 and 13, and the man that they thought they respected as their father, they've lost complete respect for me. My family lost respect for me. People in the church lost respect. I lost pretty much everybody. In fact, I at one time tried to go back to my church where I'd been very involved, and I had a woman come up to this Haitian woman, and because our church encompassed a lot of the ghettos and the beach. It was kind of interesting because we had very wealthy and very poor people together. And this one woman came up to me and said, "Jason, I used to bring my boys to church every single week, and these kids grew up in the hoods, and there was no minute. I mean, it was it's
Yeah."
So she said, "I used to bring my boys to church every week," and says, and I used to point at the stand, and I pointed to you, and she said, "Boys, that's the way you treat a woman." And she was just sobbing. And she says, "What do I tell my boys now?" And I had two women actually could share a very similar experience with me about how I, let them down. And I will tell you this: when my life fell apart, Laban, it was interesting because it wasn't just my life that fell apart. It was the damage, the ripples went across. I mean, that little church fell apart literally, and my family, my friends. The divorce started in my own family. So my sisters said, "How could my brother, if he did this, and if he could turn to become like this, what about my own?" And they lost faith in their men. It was just the ripples from what happened to me, the rippling effect, the damage it caused just went so far that honestly it kind of felt like more than I could handle. And like I said, I just ran and I numbed myself in drugs and sex and anything I could to distract myself from looking the man in the mirror and facing what the consequences of my actions. Are you still able to hear me, by the way?
I got you, brother. I just got myself on mute. It gives me a bit of audio. I'm loving this.
So, yeah, basically I went dark, and the only thing it was all I wanted to do was be numb. I was completely unsuccessful with work. Again, I went from running my own businesses. I couldn't run it. I was actually trying to start another business. It failed. I ended up selling pest control. Here I am supposed to be a successful adult. And ironically, I was out selling, pest control, and I'd be sitting on the side of the curbs and I couldn't even go face someone in the door. I mean, I was so wrecked as an individual. And anyways, I ended up getting a job getting involved politically, a political organization, which was a huge thing for me because it kind of brought me back to God, because politics, freedom is very tied to God. Liberty and God, they go together. And so as I started getting involved in this, freedom type organization, this political organization that was designed around getting people engaged in Congress, it was a window for God to kind of start to get back in touch with me. But bottom line, to shorten things up, eventually everything in Florida, my wife and I continue to just destroy things. And
And eventually God had enough with us, and everything around us collapsed. Again, my wife and I were together now, and we'd been together for a couple of years. Our home, we were losing our home, my job, the car, everything was collapsing around us, everything. And around that time, it was like things were so bad. My wife was like, "What's going on here?" And she grew up Jewish, and she was trying to understand why the universe was just like completely trying to destroy us, because she could see it. I mean, well, you couldn't. It was clear that there was some forces going on outside around us, that this is not normal. There's whether it's supernatural or there's something happening, because literally like the world was collapsing around us in every possible way it could. And it was God basically literally shaking and trying to get our attention. And bottom line is I knew in my heart we needed to leave Florida and come back to Utah. And so I told my wife, I says, "Hey," and at the same time, we start to find spirit. We start to talk about, Christ. We start to talk about, about the gospel. We start talking about spirituality, what's going on, angels, and, what's really, beyond the veil, what we see with our eyes. And she starts to become very spiritually awake, yet things kept just falling down apart around us. And we're like, long story short, we start praying in our relationship. I mean, we're still using drugs and doing all the things we shouldn't be doing, but we start praying, and we notice it's, well, yes, it's, and we start talking to, a spiritual advisor, and he's one that encouraged start praying and listening to hymns. And we start doing that. And we're like, we do feel peace when we listen to the hymns and when we pray, but it's like things are still rough. It's like we felt peace when we could dope out too. So bottom line is we just realized we have to leave Florida. And at the same time, we found out that a hurricane is coming and this was in 2017 when that last big hurricane came out there. So, I mean, it was a miraculous story. It was really a crazy story. The whole, us leaving, we left with the hurricane. Like the day we left, like we were packed out with the hurricane coming in. Everybody was evacuating Florida at the same time, and people were running out of gas and out of water. It was very apocalyptic. But we come out to Utah, and, when we got out to Utah, it's like the minute we got out to Utah, everything changed. Like it went from the universe completely shutting us down to completely opening up financially. Everything just started happening for us. And, we started becoming very close to God, which we're praying on a regular basis. And interestingly enough, we're still, addicts in every single way you could imagine, and still very much into our addictions. But I found it very fascinating that as addicted as we were, and as much as we were still living so wrong, God was very much in our lives and guiding us and giving us peace and allowing us to feel the Spirit, because he saw we were making progress, because he was kind of coaxing us forward. But, it's really interesting because, we had this magical relationship, 2017, 2018. And then 2019 came, maybe it was 2018, 2019, somewhere right in there. And all of a sudden, this magical relationship we had just overnight fell apart. We'd been married now. We got married into 2017. And all of a sudden, we went from this perfect relationship to like literally like all of a sudden it was like we had all these problems, like incredible problems. Like she was not attracted to me. Our sex life, which was always amazing, just overnight just disappeared. And I'm like, wait a minute. Like I had these problems with my first wife, like the sex issues, like, and I was like, common denominator is me. And I'm like, what in the hell is wrong with me? And it was like, and I loved my wife, and I was still head over heels for her, and she had completely lost attraction to me overnight. And I loved her so much. I was like, I was willing to figure out anything to get her back. And that started a year and a half of really probably one of my biggest hells. And because I was completely, now she had turned away from me. I'd lost pretty much everyone else in my life, and I had nowhere to go but God. And the truth is I'd been pretty stagnant in my relationship with him. Once I got back to Utah, like we made some minimal efforts, but we were still like the dog to its vomit, going back to our old habits. So I started reading books on masculinity. I don't know why I was guided towards that, because I knew our sexual attraction was off, and I wanted her to be turned on to me because I'm a sex addict. So it's like, obviously, I'm going to figure this out. And as I'm digging into this, I'm sorry, it was like I spent literally a year and a half just reading philosophy and stoicism and really just turning to God, like every morning, and what I learned through the process was, the story of Pinocchio, right?
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Well, there's a really powerful analogy it's about a boy who's a puppet controlled by things outside of him. He's not autonomous. And it's a story about a boy who learns to be in control of himself, a real man. And he starts off with, with these certain problems he has to overcome, and he overcomes these one problems. Then he overcomes his self-control and Pleasure Island, and he comes back and he's got things figured out. And the last thing he's got to figure out is he comes back and his dad's gone. And so he goes to look for his dad. And do you remember where his dad was? His dad was in the bottom of the ocean. And so Pinocchio has to go down into the ocean. And he goes down to the ocean. Well, the ocean is like our subconscious. And he has to go down to the very deepest part of the ocean and find the biggest monster in the ocean and face it. And then rescue his father from the belly of the well. And once he rescues his father from his belly of the well, and he comes back, then all of a sudden he's finally now a real boy. And this was the principle that changed my life, because, through 2019, here's what I was realizing is, look, I was like, I cleaned up my life when I was 19, 20 years old. I thought I'd gotten my, shit together. I was going to church. I was doing everything I was supposed to be doing. And yet I ended up following the exact same patterns my parents followed. I ended up divorced. I ended up with, and it was like, what? And I was not interested in finding God again and then following. And I needed to figure out, because I found God. And one of the things I learned during the process is yes, salvation is easy. God will forgive you in a heartbeat. But there's something more than salvation, and that's fixing yourself. You've got, you still have to fix yourself. You still have to overcome your addictions. You still have to overcome the animal that you were. And finding salvation, God doesn't heal those. He may forgive you, but if you're an addict and you've got all this baggage you've been carrying, you've still got to go figure out why you're so effed up and un-F yourself, so to say. And that's what the story of Pinocchio is. And, there's a really, so when he goes and rescues his father, there's something very profound there. And there's a really cool quote I read that says the boy is the father to the man.
Do you know, I've never seen Pinocchio to that extent. I don't think I've seen it in its entirety. I can't have. I never knew that story.
It's deep. But think about that. The boy is the father.
It is deep.
So where did I learn to be a man? It was that little 14-year-old boy. That's my father. That was the boy that laid my foundations. It was that boy that experienced life, divorce, and everything. And so as an adult, once I've got things figured out to fully heal, I've got to go back and I've got to heal that. I've got to rescue that little boy who learned how to cope, who learned how from 12 years old, every 6 months, leaving his friends behind. I created some baggage throughout that. I learned to heal. I learned to disassociate from people. I learned to cut people off. I learned to not let people get close. I learned to protect my heart from being damaged as a child. The only way I could survive is to protect it myself. But what I never learned is how to really cope through that. And so the things I used to cope as a child, as a teenager, were the very things that kept me enslaved and put me in basically ruined my life later.
Because you like on the surface of it all, this I presume this is when you're in Miami. You were a bodybuilder. I'm guessing by some photographs I saw there was some competitions that you were entering and maybe winning. I don't know. Is that true?
Yeah, that was when I was back here in Utah that I got, and that was the thing. It was like, when I was in that place, in that dark place, it was like, I loathed the guy in the mirror. I didn't respect myself, and so the only thing I could do was go and hit the weights in the gym. And seeing my body transformed, it kind of like allowed me to, because we all have the need to become more, to grow. And while I knew as spiritually and mentally in every way I was collapsing in my life, at least in that way, I was like, I could feel like I was doing something productive. And so, yeah, I mean, I was on this, did very well and was competing. My wife was competing, but inside I was an absolute, and I looked like a man, and everyone who saw me is like, all the guys like, that's how you want to look. But inside, but the real man was just a rotted out. I wasn't a man at all.
Is that indicative of most of the bodybuilders, the male bodybuilders that you've come across?
I don't want to say all, but I would say this. Colby and I were talking about this the other day. We all have two beings within us. You've got the being that the world sees, that the world gives value to, the way I dress, the way I look, my profession. But then there's a being within that's my higher self, my inner self, my potential, my divine self. And one of the things I learned is that when I was in my addicted self, it was my physical self, my sexual self, my need for certain emotions, drugs, sex, that ruled everything in my life. The way I looked, my physical body and my physical needs ruled everything. And one of the things I had learned through this journey, I'll tell you something crazy that happened to me through this journey. I got into meditating because it was everything. One of the things I learned is I had to stop serving the body and start letting my spiritual self grow. And I had a really cool experience. So I got into meditating, got to stoicism, anything I could to master this. And one day I was meditating and I had a really profound spiritual experience where I started having out of body experience, and my spirit starts to come out of me. And it was epic. It was one of the most epic experiences. Like, it was like I was so elated. And once my spirit was starting to come out, all of a sudden I felt it pause. And I had this little dialogue with myself. And I was like, I wanted my spirit to go because I felt that I could sense its freedom. I could sense it wanted to kind of come out and be free too. And all of a sudden, but it stopped, and it's like, what's wrong? And it just paused. It was just this quiet moment. And then my soul basically said, Jason, you have not been good to me. And, it said, all these years you've numbed me, you've ignored me, you've silenced me. You've basically suffocated it, so it had no power. It's lived powerless within me like a withered vine. And I recognized that. And my spirit said to me, says, Jason, let me lead your life. It says, I've seen God face to face. I've seen the worlds created. I says, I'm eternal. And it says, let me lead your life. And it was a profound experience that changed me from then on. And I've ever since then really tried to allow that spiritual being within to be stronger than what you see in the mirror, if that makes sense. Really try to focus on listening to it and feeding that spirit. The reality is what I learned in 2018, 2019, those darkest days of my life were the most profound things. I mean, that's where I learned why I haven't had addiction problems, why I learned, why personally I was obsessed with sex. why, I mean, and a lot of it came down to my childhood. For example, I had an experience when I was running for office. By the way, I mean, how I ended up running for office is a crazy story too, but I'm running for office, and my life been in complete order for some time now. And I'd been letting that spiritual being rule. And one day I was having a very rough morning and day, and it was under a ton of stress. And I felt this huge desire to look at porn. And I left my wife, and I was on the road, and I was like, what in the world is going on? And so I pulled over, and I'm like, just trying to understand, why am I feeling this? Like, what's going on inside? Like, I haven't had an issue with this for a long time. Why do I feel this animalistic like desire? And finally, I realized what it was. Throughout my childhood, because I didn't have a father in the home, whenever I was stressed, I went to mother. I went to mom, and mother made me feel better. Mother put her arms around me. Mom said, everything's going to be okay. Mother gave me comfort in a different way than father does. What does father do? Father says, boy, you're going to be okay. Let's get your shit together. Stand up, pull up your pants. Let's figure things out. Mom says, let's make you feel good. Well, when mom's not there anymore, where do those men go? Where did I go when things were rough after the divorce? Where did I go? I went to sex. I went to drugs. I went to things to make me feel good. And I realized the reason I was doing that was I was reaching out for the feminine. And what I needed in my life right now was not the feminine. I needed the masculine. And so I realized, no, I don't need my mother right now. I don't need porn. What I need is my father. And I called my dad, and he and I had a very on and off strained and incredible relationship. It's been very on and off, but I called my dad and said, Dad, I'm really struggling. Let me tell you what's going on. And my dad's like, Jason, you know what? You're going to get this through this. And all of a sudden it was that desire was gone. I needed the masculine. But again, these are things I didn't understand that were going on in my life because the little boy was, because of the way I learned to cope through things. So I'm completely dominating the conversation here. But yeah. So the reason, Colby and I, this American masculinity is, and the reason I'm so interested in men is because the more I've learned, and I've spent, years now studying what it means to be a man, and the masculine energy and the feminine energy, and running for office and everything I've experienced over the last, few years, it has made it very clear that there is a war on men. That, there's just as there is a war on freedom, there's this Marxist push that's going on across, across the country. Part of this Marxist push is to just, the only way to take this country over is if you have a nation full of weak men. Nations rise and fall on the strength of their men. And the Spartans were not weak men. Our founding fathers were not weak men. But if you can destroy the family, if you can take the father out of society, and take true masculinity and hide it from society, and have boys growing up not sure what it means to be a man and acting in very aggressive ways and in some ways and acting very. If you can destroy the man, you destroy the family, you destroy destroy all of society. And the reason, after running for office, I have one objective, and that is to fight tyranny. It is to defend the Constitution. And I have just come to realize the only way we are going to do that is if we can get men to stand up and be men again. And that's not just standing in the mirror and flexing and being buff guys. That's not just men being out there I'm in control and follow me. It's men who have learned to master themselves, who then can influence society around them to where they have the ability to make a difference in society. And so that's why Colby and I are doing this. American masculinity is the whole world hangs in the balance. You came out of Australia. Australia is all but fallen. You look what's going on in Brazil right now. You look across the world, even right here in America, the world is hanging in the balance. It is hanging by a thread. And one way or the other, either if we are to save this, we need men to stand up and be men, to be in control of their own lives, to be leaders in their families, to be good fathers, to be good stewards, to be good neighbors, to be good statesmen. We don't even know what statesmen are anymore. And if things do go south, we stop living the way we've been living like kings and queens, and we go back to the way things used to be before this protected society, we live so sheltered with electricity. If things go back to the way they've been throughout most of humanity, which they will, the world be screaming for men that have strength, for men that are strong, that men who can handle the suffering, for men who can handle the shit that is coming, and who can be there and not just take care of themselves, but can be pillars of strength for their families and communities. So this world needs men. And so that's why, Colby and that is our number one focus right now is helping men realize this country, this world needs them more than it's ever needed them before. And so, and again, most of my story is, I've done a lot of dumb things, made a lot of mistakes, but I've learned a lot of lessons. And I'm one of these guys that's just had to learn the hard way. But my lessons have really just taught me the importance of I guess men learning turning back to God or a higher power, and stepping into who they truly are and becoming better leaders. So, kind of long story. There you go, bro.
Amen, brother. Well, look, this is the reason, one of the reasons, many reasons why I wanted to have you two jokers on the show, because it's how you're communicating and how you're coming across. I can put you back in the stream if you want, Colby. I can leave it out on the same one. 2-on-1's good. I like that. And what I find hilarious, two things. If we'd met like 15 years ago at a bar in South Beach, we probably would have gone as well as we do now, just with a few bags of cocaine. Maybe not you, Colby, but and the other thing is that David Goggins was a pest controller, if you remember. Have you read his book, Can't Hurt Me? There's a lot of parallels, right? And what you've got now is perspective, and you've got reference, and you've got an ability to relate with people, and that's why I think you can see the book I can see it in the top right hand corner of my screen. My journey, and Colby, you've read it. My journey of similar stuff, but it makes us relatable, and we need that in order to get through to the men of our generation, because it really feels like it's getting away from us real quick, faster than I ever thought, and it's hard to keep up. What do you reckon?
Yeah, no, I've talked too much.
No, you're good. This has been great, man. I love hearing from you.
Colby? You tell me. You give me your opinion on this.
It is. It's increasing at a speed that's astronomical. It really is. I see it with my neighbors. I see it with my friends. I see it at the gym. Men need role models, and we're lacking good role models. I mean, you look at social media. Who do we have for role model? Who are the role models that we're looking up to? Are they real men on social media? Who are we looking up to? Right?
Bloody Will Smith.
Will Smith, Rock. I mean, a bunch of guys that maybe
Homer Simpson.
Yeah, maybe Homer, maybe Bart. But really, that's who our kids are being shaped after, right? They're not being shaped after their father, because their father is either home sitting on the couch after a long day at work, doesn't want to be bothered, low testosterone. I mean, that's another thing. I mean, guys 40 and older, I mean, they're pretty much worthless. They're just sitting on the couch laying around, not in their children's lives, right? So it's got to start with the role model. You have to be a role model. And with American Masculinity, that's part of our goal, is to find role models, be better role models, and really help men change their lives, really, because what they're seeing on social media, including our kids, including my boys. I've got a 16 and 18-year-old and a 5-year-old boy. And what they see on social media, that's not what a man is. That's not real men, right?
I think one of the greatest dangers we have is humans is the idea that we have things figured out. We're very afraid of the unknown. And so we quickly assign, So we're very quick to think we know things. We're very quick to say we have it figured out. And that's what retards us. That's what prevents us from really understanding more of what's of reality. And that's why you hear these philosophers, these most brilliant minds saying that, realizing that they know nothing. And I think one of the greatest things that we've completely lost is, what does it mean to be a man? It is a very powerful question. What does it truly mean to be a man? And of course, yeah, we know men and women, but at a deeper level, because it used to be that most societies had these rituals that the boy once he's around 12 years old, the boy has to die so that it's to become a man. There's all these rituals where the boy goes out with his father, he goes out with the men in the tribe, and they take him through these very difficult experiences. And most civilizations had very different ways of doing it, but they all had very similar traditions. But the bottom line is, this boy went through things that were at the end of it, after go through these immense suffering and struggles, he came back and was no longer the child who his mother took care of, but that boy came back now as a man whose now responsibility was to take care of people. And that's always been a very important process and step in the maturation process of boys to men. Well, you look at where we are today, where you've got guys that have gone to college, guys in their 20s that are still living home with mom, that still need safe spaces, that are afraid of getting hurt, that are afraid of words. They're sheltered. They don't know how to provide for other people, let alone themselves, let alone other people. So we've lost that, and yet we don't stop to think, is there a problem with men in our days? Have we lost something? And I think it's quite clear when you look at the divorce rate, when you look at the problems in society, when you look at issues, Laban, like you talked about, where men say, "Hey, I'm going to do this," and there's no integrity anymore. When you look at our politicians, and they're all corrupt, self-serving, bastards. I mean, when you look at how this world is falling apart, and if the role of the man the masculine is to lead, right? That is the role of the masculine. And again, women have masculine and feminine too, but the role of the masculine is to lead. And when you look at our leaders and you see the collapse in leadership on a political, global, you have to say there's a problem with the men. There's a problem.
Yeah, amen. And do you know, I saw some numbers today, and it was around health from another guy on social media, and I wish I had them in front of me, but the numbers were ridiculous. It was like a huge percentage of the North American population were obese. A large number of children that enter high school are obese. The type 2 diabetes, a lot of the other chronic health diseases. And it's like, how can you defend yourself or your rights and your freedoms when you can't even look after yourself? And it's funny, Jason, you were talking about that inner child, that spirit part of you. I did this healing plant medicine thing back in Florida. I think I told you about it 5 weeks ago or so. And she was communicating with my 2-year-old inner child. And the inner child communicated to me, how can you raise a son, Laban, if you're not able to look after me? And ever since I've had that experience, I've been paying attention to my 2-year-old inner self, right? And the 2-year-old inner child is responsible, according to this wonderful woman, Roxanne Beck, that ran this thing, is responsible for all of my crazy ideas. It's where a lot of the creativity comes from, and these problem solving ideas and fun ways to engage with my wife and a lot of these other things, because the grown-up, masculine, mature guy, can be a little bit boring. Is any of this resonating with you guys?
Yeah, I had a question though. I find it interesting you call this being within you a 2-year-old, when this 2-year-old or this inner being seems to be responsible for all your most brilliant ideas.
Yeah, look. Drop my mouse. It's all right. I don't know exactly what the metaphor is or the parameters around what it is, but it's that part of us that I suppose is as a 2-year-old, I was a rat bag. I was climbing and I was stealing milk money from my family to go and buy lollies, like down at the local candy store. It's that part of you that has fun and can have joy. So I don't know which idea specifically, but one idea I had. Do you guys remember those Zorb balls? Do you remember the Zorbs? It's a Zorb, Z-O-R-B, Z-O-R-B, and you jump inside them. They have them in New Zealand and a few other places around the world, and they put water in them, and they've got a smaller ball that you sit inside, and then a much bigger ball that's bouncy, and it's see-through, and it goes down the mountain. You're in this cocoon thing, right? Well, we were at a party one night, and I had this 2-year-old child idea that you could survive being dropped out of a plane or a hot air balloon in one of these things, right? And 98% of everyone said, "No, that's ridiculous." And maybe one other person said, "Oh, yeah, maybe you could do that." So, I emailed the CEO of the Zorb company in New Zealand and asked them the question about, would you survive? And they very quickly warned me away from doing it because I thought you could do something with Red Bull and Extreme and yada, yada. Well, about a year later, I got a call from the CEO's secretary asking if I'd like to meet up for lunch when he was visiting in Australia. And he invited me out for lunch, and we sat down, and here I am thinking he's going to, entertain this idea for being dropped out of a hot air balloon. And what must have happened is my name had got on a mailing list for potential investors, and he took me out for lunch, and he realised very quickly that I wasn't an investor. I was just this nutcase from New Zealand that wanted to know whether I could survive. So maybe that's one example. I don't know. Do you guys get these ideas as well?
Well, I love that idea because I've got a 2-year-old at home, so I know exactly what that looks like to have a 2-year-old self, right? And what it is, it's joy, it's playful, it's living in the present moment. He doesn't know about tomorrow. He has no idea about tomorrow. He has no idea that nap time's in 5 minutes, and doesn't want to go down for a nap. All he is looking for is pure joy and love, right? And so I love that you bring that up, because being able to wrestle with him and really see what a 2-year-old is like, or 2 or 3 or 4, I've got a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old and a 5-year-old. So I know what it's like with all those ages, but there's something that's there it's as pure as life gets, right? Those ages, pure. It's just loving life, living in the moment, and not worrying about what happened yesterday, because he has no idea what happened yesterday, unless he got hurt maybe, so he won't do that again, but doesn't worry about the past or the future, and it's living in the present moment, and that's where joy is, right?
I think that's that is, to me, ultimate wisdom, right? Because that is ultimate wisdom is to learn to live as a child. That's what Christ taught us, to live like a child, to be present, to be in the now. And I think that being within us, Socrates talked about it all the time. The daemon, he called it. If anytime as long as it was his daemon or his inner self that led him to his everything he became. Napoleon Hill talks about his other self. So this being that's within us, regardless of how we, whatever we call it. The fact of the matter is, there is something I would clearly say is a spark of divinity that when we are in tune with we resonate at a higher level. We have ideas that we don't normally have. We play in the zone. We find it, and that being does understand presence, because when we're distracted, we can't hear it. When we're watching TV, when we're mad, when we're angry, when we're stressed out, that being, we can't hear that higher self. And we talked about this when we had you on the show the other day, but Oh, so this, if people could learn to let that higher self lead, it would take very few people to change the world. And again, you look at some of the greatest minds in history, and so many of them you start to look through, and I've got actually I've stored quotes from some of the greatest minds, and there you wouldn't believe how many references there are to whether it's the daemon or the higher self or the other self or the divine self or the inner child. But there's clearly something within us, and the world seems bent on crushing that and having us play at a lower inner frequency in life.
And I love both those points, by the way. You reminded me, Jason, I don't know whether we discussed this on the show. David Hawkins, the different levels of consciousness. Did we talk about this at all? You know what I'm talking about? So it's this little graph, and for those that are just listening, it's an upside-down pyramid, an upside-down triangle, and on the left, it's got, from the very bottom, it's like the different levels of consciousness that humans, they've mapped this out. David Hawkins, a very famous guy, he's dead now, and one of his mentees is a guy, Dr. Daniel Harner, who's become a good friend of mine, would be a wonderful guest to have on American Masculinity to explain a lot of this, right? But this affects male and female. So down the bottom, it starts from hell, purgatory, in between paradise, and then heaven, right? And on the other side, it's got the different levels of consciousness. So from the bottom, I'll read them all. And they're numbered. So from 20 to 1,000, right? And just to have a guess what these are: shame, guilt, apathy, fear, grief, desire, anger, pride, courage, neutrality, willingness, acceptance, inner light, inner wisdom, inner love, oneness. And that's sort of when you get to that self-realization. Presence, non-duality, awareness, something they call the great void, divine grace and love union, supra-casual truth, and full consciousness. And what happens is, apparently, as you ascend, right? Now, I can tell from the time I've spent with you guys that you're up that ladder a good chunk, right? I've been told I'm at 600, that acceptance, I think it's called, right? And the further, you still got me?
Yep.
The further up we go, the more of the lower level people that we impact. So if you are towards the top, right, and someone like Tony Robbins was used as a reference, he's probably up in the top, maybe 2 or 3 from the top. And so his impact of being at that level impacts, I think, 250,000 people or 250 million people, I forget. So rather than trying to get the whole world to change, all we need, and this is what you were sort of touching on, maybe without even realizing, is we need a smaller number of men and women to change and to level up, to be able to positively influence the rest.
I love it. That's 100%. And one of the things we pulled the chart while you're talking, and I love that one of the at the top levels of enlightenment and is the ability to see things as they are and not as you want them to be, particularly your own self. And I think, to me, that's what true enlightenment is to be able to see yourself as you really are, to see your flaws, to see your faults, to see the garbage, because it's so easy that we play a game of, we like to pretend it's not there, that we want to fool ourselves that there's nothing there to see, that we're fine as we are. And that's what damns us and keeps us from ascending to higher levels, is because there's no need to change. There's no need to grow. There's no need to progress because everything's already fine. And to me, in my life, one of the things I found where I've experienced in some of my most moments that I felt like were true enlightenment were moments where I was able to see myself as I actually was. And I will tell you, it was actually embarrassing, because to be able to see myself, I was like, oh my gosh, I had no idea that I've been acting this way and looking this way. And it was actually humiliating. But at that point, I was free to change and to let some of those habits and characteristics and things in my life go. What, I can't hear you.
The fact that you can, sorry, I had it on mute. Dropped my mouse and it's too far away to pick up. I'm manualizing. The fact that you're even aware of this, right, and that you can verbalize it shows that your level of development is far higher. Because if you go back to these guys that, and I won't ever name them, it's not my job to do that. But if you think about where they're operating on that list, right, where are they operating on that list? Are they operating at courage or willingness or acceptance, or are they operating at fear and grief and apathy? And so what it does, sort of having an idea of this, it gives me a level of empathy. And it's okay for me to get fired up about it, but it gives me a great deal of empathy. And I think as you head towards enlightenment, that empathy level rises. I feel sorry for people for fear of getting political. I feel sorry for all the people that are in these positions of power that clearly have no clue about empathy or any idea about how other people are living. I feel sorry for them. Can you imagine what kind of life that must be for them, waking up every day and being in a complete blur about how to go about being a high-functioning, contributing member of society who's spiritually connected to Source?
There's one of my favorite quotes, and I'm going to watch it, is, I love Alexander Solzhenitsyn, but one of the things because as I was looking at this and thinking about it, the reality is I know that for me, I do this. I'm there's been times where I've been very much, felt very in control of my. There's been times where I've been very much playing at a higher level. Let's just say that the Spirit is leading. I'm operating at close to my potential, and it's incredible. But I also know that then I come back down. I get prideful. I feel like I've got it, and I let go of, and I start to. So I do this a lot, and so it's. I will tell you, for me, it's that's one of the challenges I struggle with is, and I think that's one of the challenges of life is having less of these drops or less significant drops and staying more consistent. But going back to Schultz, he says, the line between good and evil. It's so easy to say, politicians evil, us rich people good. He says the line between good and evil divides every single one of us. The line between good and evil, what is it? Divides. It basically goes between every one of us, and it says, and it oscillates over time. So that line between good and evil, we're all part good, we're all part bad. We all have times when we're higher up, sometimes we're lower up, and that's the challenge. Is it oscillates over time, and for me, that's the thing that, But that's also one of the great things is if you know who you are and you know what you're capable of, and then you come back and live below that, you have this divine discontent where and it's the same thing with bodybuilding, right? When you get that body, and then all of a sudden, then after you start getting lazy, and all of a sudden you start to look not so good, you have that divine discontent that drives you back up there. You're never satisfied being, once you've reached certain levels. And I think that goes the same with bodybuilding and the same for this spiritual enlightened ascendment too.
Yeah, 150,000%. And if it makes you guys feel any better, because it made me feel better when I heard it, it's some ridiculous numbers. Like 80% of the global population operates below 100 from fear down to shame. So,
sure.
but that point, it's like if you are operating below that almost the whole time versus what you're talking about, and I know how I'm experiencing what Colby's doing. That we do have these moments. We do have these moments, these weak moments where we go and jerk off and watch porn and whatever. But if you can get back and then continue that path, that growth, because once you become consciously incompetent, then you can start learning about this and all the people, all the work, all the books, all the stuff on Stoics. That's all helped forge this man that you've become today and becoming a leader. And Colby, in your own way, without having to go through so much of the trauma, you're learning your learning pathway was faster, which is great, you know, because it's rare. It's rare that people's mums and dads are still together that have functional relationships, you know?
It sure is. And that's exactly, with the consciousness, you know, one book that I read that I really liked, Power of Now. You read that?
I think that is David Hawkins.
No. It's Toll.
Eckhart Tolle, yeah.
Oh, Eckhart Tolle, is it? Right, yeah. Sounds familiar. There's Power versus Force, which is David Hawkins, sorry. Yeah, keep going.
Yeah. So I read that book. It's been 5 or 6 years ago. That changed my life, right? Because it helps you focus on who you are, who's really in here, like Jason talked about earlier. What's inside of you, right? And not the outside. And that's what we're talking about. Everyone's less than 100 on that scale, right? They're living on the outside and not living within themselves to really see what they're capable of doing. And especially men, right?
You know, and I really honestly feel like there is, that's not an accident. The founder of our modern school system is John Dewey. I don't know if you know much about John Dewey. And Fabian.
Is that the Dewey Decimal System? That guy?
Yes.
Oh, that was a good guess. Yeah, there you go. Yeah. I do know something.
So here's what's interesting, though. So he's the founder of the modern education system. And what a lot of people don't know is he was a devout Fabian socialist. And the Fabian socialists, you can look it up online. It is a real organization. He was a self-avowed member of their organization. Their crest is a wolf in sheep's clothing. That is their crest. And their objective was to destroy America. And they realized, they were a communist socialist organization. There was 2 schools of thought back then. One was you destroy it through military force, which is what the Cold War was about. But the Fabian socialists believe, no, if we're going to destroy America, we have to destroy it from within. You have to do it through the educational system, through Hollywood, through the media, through propaganda, through the individual. So the whole modern school system is designed to create followers, to create people who operate at a low level, to discourage kids and individuals from thinking independently, from being unique individuals. I mean, and if you really think about what the school system does to a child, when a child goes to school at a young age, why? Their mind is on fire to learn. Why this? Tell me why. You can't stop their hunger. You put them in school, and all of a sudden, what happens to that hunger? Well, why is this, teacher? No, we're learning this today. All of a sudden, their natural independent curiosity is quelched, and it becomes controlled, forced learning. The child quickly learns to hate it. And then the child that thinks independent, when the teacher asks a question, and the child that has a unique answer is shunned by the class. Think about it. Was your kid? That's right. That's why we didn't do well in school. We were too independent, and we were shunned from that society. If you come up with an answer different from the teacher, you're wrong. If you're unique from the class, you're weird. So we learn to conform. We learn to be like everybody else. We learn to play at the level of everyone else. And that is not by accident that we have a society of people that are at that low level of operation, because the thing tyranny fears most is people like me, people like Colby, people who are tapping into their divine potential. Because people who tap into their divine potential are limitless. And no tyrant wants a nation full of limitless, divine people who are self-empowered. You are dangerous to tyrants.
I love that. And this makes me feel so much better for school. Not that I gave 2 tosses about my academic results, but the simple fact that I bombed out has allowed me to have this free-thinking mind. And I love challenging academics when it comes to some of these topics. They get so caught up in 6 years of being regurgitating the same crap, and I love the look on their face when I say something that I've got from my own source that that challenges them, and I feel sorry for them, because it's like some people put their whole careers around these ideas, and there's going to be a lot of that, and the only way to deal with that, I think, is by dropping ego. What do you reckon?
The death of the ego is, most people don't experience it sober. That's what's one of the things about different, psychedelics and mushrooms, whatever. There's different drugs that give you experience ego death. Obviously, you can experience it through meditation and through learning it, but most people have never experienced it or even know. Again, we don't know what we don't know. So the death of the ego is a heart that knows nothing but love. I mean, it's acceptance. It's a powerful feeling.
And just a word of warning on the psychedelics things, right? There was an incident that happened recently, and I won't go into much detail now, but the person involved had done 30 ayahuasca ceremonies, right? And they came out and they verbally attacked and accused the person involved of narcissism. And upon reflection, there was no narcissism at all. And I spoke to a friend of mine who's she's a sacred clown shaman who's done 30 years of meditation, but God never called her towards the plant medicine side of things. So she's done everything through breath work and the other mediums, right? And what she said was really interesting. She said there's a phenomenon that happens when people jump onto psychedelics without having done the work. And when you don't do the work on here, you have this spiritual experience, this supernatural experience, but you haven't done the internal work that needs to have happened before you can properly benefit from that. And it creates this disconnect and this like superiority complex. And if you've still got the ego, it turns the person into an absolute nightmare and holier than thou. And she said it's very common amongst people in her community that don't do the work. So and I'm a huge fan. I've only done it once since I've been sober, but I would highly recommend that you make sure that you're doing the work here before you really go and get stuck into this other stuff, and because it can be a bit of a slippery slope, apparently.
Yeah, and one of the other things about that stuff is if you're not able to master your emotions, if you're not in control of your thoughts, people can have really bad experiences on that stuff where their mind can run away with them, and they can end up in some dark places where quite literally sometimes they can't escape, and I've seen people have permanent damage from that. So it's not something that should be taken lightly by any stretch of imagination. But the other thing too, I've seen ego death personally in my own life, just not only meditation, but we've got some like spiritual, when you have a very intense spiritual experience with God, where or the divine, however you want to call it, where you can feel that same ego death in some of those moments too, where your heart just feels completely soft, pure, and you feel that pure love. So it's, one of the things about some mushrooms is you can have some really and crazy experiences, but I believe there's no experience you can have on drugs that you can't have sober, because drugs, all they're doing is activating things that are already within you. And I think through meditation, through spiritual experiences, you can have a lot of those same experiences.
Yeah, I agree. I've spoken to people personally firsthand that have had similar hallucinogenic experiences through breath work and a number of other things. So if you are going to do it, find someone that you trust with your life. Get some really strong referrals, and like that lady, Dr. Roxanne Beck. We did a private ceremony with her, and I've never felt so safe and protected in all my life. And it's one of those things that I will keep on a very, very infrequent basis, because I don't even know if I needed to do any more. And incidentally, maybe I told you this, maybe I didn't. I used to drink a pot of French press black coffee every single day, at least, for most of my adult life. And after that plant medicine experience, which was 5 weeks ago, I haven't touched a single drop of coffee since, which I'm pretty chuffed about. So that was a beautiful unintended byproduct.
That was ayahuasca?
No, it was penis envy was the mushroom, because it looks like a penis apparently, and it's one of the most powerful visual psychedelics or psilocybin fungi that you can take.
We ought to have another podcast sometime on psilocybin, on mushroom food. I think that'd be a fun conversation.
Well, I absolutely think we should. Well, I think now's a good time to tell people more about American Masculinity and the network that you have at some of the other shows as well. This is an opportunity for a shameless plug. You have my permission.
All right. Well, we've got a podcast. It's if you go to We Are the People Radio, it's a radio show that we push out on YouTube. We push it on all the major podcast channels. But yeah, if you do a search for We Are the People Radio, and most of it is geared around freedom. We have our mission is simple. It is to save this country. It is to stand up for freedom. It is to inspire regular people to stand up and play the role that we believe that they were sent to play in such a time as this. We live in I've had people look. We live in prophetic times. I'm not going to beat around the bush. I've asked so many people, and so many people agree. We live in incredible times, and God did not send His second string for this fight. And those who are awake, who have eyes to see, their job is they have a bigger role than sitting behind a screen in these times. They have a bigger role to play. And our mission, we feel, is to wake them up and to call them to battle. And whether it's men standing up to be men, whether it's, we do an episode every Wednesday on called God in America, where we talk about the importance that God has always played in this country and will continue to play, and the importance of bringing Him back into this nation. And then we talk about issues, whether it's election integrity, whether it's, there's so many issues happening across the country right now regarding freedom, Brazil, what's going on in Brazil right now. So we talk about regular issues, and it's, 5 days a week from 4 to 6. And, the great thing about us is it's
mountain time. It's mountain time, by the way, for those folks listening in.
Yeah, we're going to talk to people like Laban Ditchburn. So, it's cool. And we're, like I say, we just started this podcast back this summer. So we're just getting going on it. Last year I was running for office, and, the reason we did this is we got to wake people up, and we got to get people in the fight, because we just need more people standing up and saying, hey, what's happening is not okay. We are living in a time similar to the emperor with no clothes. We have a government telling us how things are. We're, living by lies, and we need people to stand up and say, you know what, that's not true. And when enough people stand up for truth, truth prevails.
Amen, brothers. Amen. Gentlemen, do you have any concluding thoughts for our audience today?
I just wanted to say one thing. I love that you showed that triangle with the level of consciousness with David Hawkins. And if I could just add one thing to that, I think that in order to increase on any of those levels, it's all a version of the ego. If you look through them all, shame, guilt, apathy, fear, all of them, at what level is your ego dying? And when you get to full consciousness, you don't have an ego at 1,000, right? So at what point is our ego dying? I find it very interesting in doing American Masculinity too, because we all fight the ego, right? And that's what men have, big egos. And until you get to that awareness or the presence where you're at, right? That's when your life starts changing. And as American Masculinity, we're going to try to get men to that point of enlightenment. Ditchburn, you're the man. You're the book. The book is amazing. If people haven't read it yet, they've got to get it. I've already recommended it to about 1,000 people. So
yeah, thank you, dude.
I'm laying in bed and I get a text from him. He's like, "You got to read this book." And I'm like, "All right." You text me like it's late at night, so I can pick up the book and
I'm selling it for you,
reading
brother.
it. It was yeah. So yeah, Laban, you're an incredible guy. You're an incredible guy, and honestly, it's been incredible having conversations with you today. Incredible, having the last podcast and just talking to you on and off. So we're blessed to know you.
Absolutely.
We need more men like you.
Absolutely.
Well, gentlemen, I graciously receive and accept that wonderful compliment, and it goes straight back at you. And I think maybe this is the beginning of something more frequent, because these kind of conversations need to be had on a far greater scale than us three jokers can pump these out. So for those that are listening, get on, subscribe to American Masculinity, and We Are the People. They're doing fantastic work. Share, if you have a burning desire, if you've got a passion for this stuff as well, create a podcast, create a platform where you can get your voice out, because everything has a tipping point. And 2.5 years ago, this was started out of a lounge room back in Australia on a 12-year-old laptop with no resources in the middle of the strictest lockdowns of anywhere in the world, and it's totally transformed my life. These guys are crushing it as well. They're doing amazing work. So thank you for tuning in today. Gentlemen, we'll see you next time. Thanks for attending. Lots of love, guys.
God bless. Thanks, Laban.